just keep learning. And I said, well, on an emotional level, I'll feel too bad when I made a mistake because you've shown me all this, and I really don't think when I go back I'm going to be like capable of doing good all the time. And yeah, and they said that I could have their forgiveness and their love. And they made it real clear this was for me because they already loved me. They can't not love me any less. I'm forgiven without even doing this. I'm forgiven before I even do it. So, for my own well-being, if I asked for their forgiveness, that I could rest assured that I was given that forgiveness. Actually, and they made it really clear, and there was some chuckling going on amongst them, that the forgiveness was granted even before the act was committed. But it was important for me to go through this little procedure of sort of a confession and an understanding that I had made a mistake, because it would help me learn. I ultimately told them that I couldn't come back because I was home and that they loved me and that I loved them and I couldn't be apart from them ever. And therefore it was impossible for me to leave because I could not bear to do that and come here. And they said that they were with me, always had been, always will be, and so it wasn't a problem. And I said, well, I never noticed you, before. And they said that it would be, they'd be here, they'd be around, and that if I really needed them, sincerely needed them, that they would let me know they were with me. And that I wasn't to worry or to fret because they were right there with me all the time and with everybody, and they always had been and they always will be. And that was real important for me to keep that in mind, because when I needed help, it was available. And when I needed their love, which is what was really important to me, that was available. Simply by asking for it. And it was really understood that it was a heart asking, not a head asking. When I needed their love, I had from my heart, not from... So finally I said, I really don't want to go back, but I can handle it. I can go back. And I said, what should I do when I go back? Should I build cathedral? Should I carve sculptures? And I told them, and I started to describe to them a wonderful vision I was having for a cathedral with carvings and paintings, and I'd build it. I'd find a piece of land and I'd build this edifice. And they laughed. They thought that was really funny because it was pointless. They made it clear to me that it was exactly what I'd done wrong. I'd always chosen working with inanimate objects all my life rather than working with people because they were malleable. I could control wood and I could control stone, but working with people is really hard. And I said, the art was fine, but don't focus my life on that. Don't focus my life on that. Focus my life on whatever people come into my life. Focus on them, and if you want to play with this other stuff, do a nice job with it. But people are really loving people and living with people is what's really important. And so there went my mission down the tubes, and no more. I didn't have a mission. And when I accepted the idea of coming back, really accepted it, I woke up. I was in the bed, in my body, and the nurses and the orderlies were hustling my wife out of the room, and they prepared me for the operation. This is around 9 o'clock, 9:30. And some weird things happened, like, for example, they dry shaved me to prepare me for the operation. They shaved me from my chin to my knees with a straight razor, no water, no soap. And they were also pulling and yanking on me. Oh, but when I came back into the body, the pain was unbelievable. I mean, you can imagine going from ecstasy back into that body. I mean, it's just like, so I'm like in this body, and I'm going like, I want out. I mean, I was already, I mean, I'm like, I can't, I want out. I don't want to be in this. And these orderlies and nurses were all pulling on me, you know, trying to get like my armpits. You know, and I'm thinking like, I'm back here for this. You know, I mean, it's like, this is awful. You know, this is, yeah. And it was real hard because there was all this confusion going on. And I didn't know whether, you know, I kept flashing on the hell, and I was flashing on the heaven, and I was like screaming for my wife, you know. I mean, I couldn't figure out why they weren't using soap or water to shave me, because this scraping with the razor and stuff like that. So finally I got done, and they put me on they put me on another gurney, on a clean gurney, and would take me out in the hall. And there was my wife. And I looked at her, and she's heard me yelling and screaming, and you know, and I was yelling at these people who were shaving me, you know, swearing at me and stuff. And my wife was really freaked out. And I said to her, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to be okay." And she like looked at me, and these tears flowing down her face, and you know, and like whoosh, I went off to the operating room, and I felt, I mean, I just had this complete sense that everything was going to be fine. So the next thing I remember was I was lying on a stainless steel table, and it had sides on it. And it was a stainless steel table with sides about 6 inches tall, and there were some very bright lights over me, extremely bright lights. And there were 2 nurses washing me with this very strong-smelling sudsy water, and I was completely naked, lying on my back, and I was being washed. And I opened my eyes, and I looked down, and I could see the staples going like this. And there was all this cruddy stuff all over me, and they were kind of scrubbing, gently, but sort of scrubbing this cruddy stuff off me, washing me. And I saw these lights and these gowned figures, just their eyes and stuff. And I said to the nurse, "Are you angels, and is this heaven or is this earth?" And the nurse didn't speak English. She didn't understand what I said. And she looked at me very concerned because I was awake. And she called to the doctor. And the doctor came over. And when he came over, I realized I didn't want to see him because I was mad at him. And so I closed my eyes. And the doctor said, "See," he said in French, "See, he couldn't possibly be awake." And then he left, and she bent over and looked down close to my face, and I popped my eyes open. And I gave her a big smile, and she was like really mad at me. I mean, and then I closed my eyes, and I all of a sudden realized that my body hurt, and I thought, I want to go back to sleep. So I closed my eyes and I went back to sleep. And then the next time I woke up, I realized I was in a lot of discomfort and pain and stuff like that, and I went in and out of consciousness. And then I woke up one time, and I had a nice conversation with an angel in my room. And then my wife came in, and I found out later this was Sunday afternoon, and I was in recovery intensive care / intensive care. My wife came in the room, and she said, and I saw her first, I said, "I'm alive." And she said, "I know you're alive." And I said, "It's all love." And she said, "I love you." And I said, "I don't mean that. I mean it's all love." And she said, "Lots of people love you." And I said, "I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just love. It's all just love." And she said, "I love you." And I said, "No, you don't understand. It's all there is just love. That's all that there is." And she said, "What are you talking about?" And I had sort of developed this idea. I said, it's sort of like a huge ocean of love, and you just have to go into it and completely be in it and sort of drown in it, and it's just all love. And she said, "You're talking absolute craziness." And I started crying real hard, really, really hard, which made me hurt, you know, because the heavy breathing. And that week in a French hospital, I'd try and tell her bits of my experience, and she'd get real spooked, real scared by him, real upset by him. She really didn't want me to hear this stuff. She didn't like it. But I kept telling her and telling her. It was real, real hard because emotionally freak out. And then just to wrap this all up, I was sick for a long time. I had the French doctor gave me non-A, non-B hepatitis, peritonitis, double pneumonia, and collapsed lung. So I had to leave that hospital, and so I had to get the angels got me well one day when I was real sick, and they got me well enough to get on a plane and come here. And I came here, and I got into a hospital, St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, and the admitting doctor here said, "How did you ever get here?" And I said, "I had help." And he looked at me like, and I didn't. I mean, I knew it was. How could I explain to him that these angels had made me well enough to get home so they could get some decent care? And I was on critical list at St. Luke's for 3.5 weeks.
Why did they just heal you?
I asked them that before I came back into my body. I said, if I go back into my body, is it going to be all messed up? And I said, yeah. And I said, there's going to be some real important lessons you're going to have to learn about. And I didn't ask him, but I found out about him. Some of the stuff is, some of the things that they taught me are pretty far out. For example, that anybody can transcend pain. Pain's not. There's much worse things in this world than physical pain, like emotional pain. There's much worse than physical pain. They taught me things about, for example, I didn't have anything in my mouth for several days. I was being fed intravenously. So, like the first time you drink a glass of water, you say to yourself, I will never, ever drink a glass of water or eat anything without being thankful. The first time you get up and walk after you haven't been able to walk for a long time. The first time you stand up and pee. The first time, for a man. The first time, I mean, I could go, the first time you shave, the first time you comb your hair, the first time you don't stink. The first time you have a bowel movement. I mean, you can go on and on. I mean, it's just all those little things. I used to sit up and go down to the lounge at St. Luke's and sit in one of those chairs and watch the traffic on 275 go by. And I'd think to myself, all those people are probably bummed out. They're driving in their cars and they're all bummed out. They don't know how lucky they are to be able to get up and go somewhere. To just say, I think I'll go someplace and get in the car and go there. Because those people in those hospitals don't go anywhere. I mean, like my big event of the day was to go to that lounge, So they taught me about just not taking stuff for granted from the littlest things. God, friends coming to visit you? Why would anybody come visit a sick person? I mean, you stink, you're crazy. I mean, when you're really sick, you stink and you smell and you're crazy and you're no fun to be with, and people would come. I had this one guy, he came every day and just sat there. And he knew, he was so sensitive, he knew I didn't even need to talk. And he didn't try and talk, because talking was not good for me, because I was really sick. He'd just sit. And then he'd get up and he'd leave every day. And I had a sign on my door, no visitors. They were real strict about it. And this guy, I told him that he was my brother. Nobody ever questioned him. Because, he was giving off these vibes like, I'm supposed to be here. And nobody ever questioned the fact that he was just a friend, What? Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the other things, too, is really relying on God, really relying on the angels. Learning lessons about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And you've had a really, really bad day. For example, not to be too gross, but one of the fun things that I got to go through was I ripped because of peritonitis, I blew up like a pregnant woman. In one day, I put on 35 pounds. So I was I had all these, they're trying to sock me full of fluids with all these IV bags, and I just put on 35 pounds of fluid overnight. Not overnight, but in about 24 hours. And I was I had this humongous belly, and my incision ripped open, and all this fluid was coming out of my stomach. It was really disgusting. Right? And you have a day like that, you can't eat. Everything you eat makes you have vomit for like 45 minutes to 2 hours. I mean, a glass of water would make me sick all day. You know, and everybody's pushing food all the time because they thought it was real important that I should try and... I was on a clear diet. I don't know if any of you ever had a clear diet, but clear diet is like clear broth, Jell-O, tea. Anyway, everybody's pushing this stuff at me, and whenever I'd take like a little bit, it would make me sick, and I'd cry, and I'd feel awful, and you know, and I'm sort of coming apart and stuff like that. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and like I'm really thinking about I don't want to be in this world anymore. And I get real depressed and think about dying, you know, I mean wanting to die and stuff like that. And then I'd think about my friends, and I'd call on them, and they'd be there for me. And the nurse would come through doing her rounds, and she'd come into my room, and I'm lying there awake with a big smile on my face, and she'd say, "Why are you awake?" And I said, "Because they just love me so much. I mean, it's just like, you know, do you know?" I'd say to her, "Do you know?" And she didn't know what the hell I was talking about, you know. She didn't have a clue. And I'd say, "God, they're so loving, they're so beautiful." And nobody understood what I was talking about. And when I tried to talk to people about it, they'd start using the clue words like, "Maybe you should see a psychiatrist." Or, "Maybe you should stop thinking about these things because they seem to upset you when you talk about them." Because I'd do what I'm doing now, you know, I'd start getting emotional. And I'd say, "You don't understand. I'm talking about things that are real, but you just don't see them, but they're there and you can be in touch with them. They're so close. And they love you so much, and they want to talk to you. They want to be with you. You know, and they care so much about you." And people would think, you know, this guy is a complete fruitcake. My mother came and stayed. She wouldn't let me talk about any of this stuff. She'd get, like, angry if I tried to talk about it. My wife would come in, and I'd try and talk to her about things that I'd learned, things that I'd heard. And I'd say to her things like, "It's real important that you talk to them. Really important. They really want to hear from you because they love you so much." She's like, "Okay, dear." And I'd see her the next day, and I'd say, "Did you try it? Did you try it?" She'd go, "No, and I'm not going to either." You know, so I became increasingly isolated and separated from everybody, and I started getting really a sense of that everybody was bad, small and mean and no good. Nobody wanted to hear about the love. And I was getting really distant. And I was also real sick and real crazy. Like I was almost completely blind. I had a lot of trouble with my hearing. Any kind of like noises freaked me out. Like what Ed just did when I was sick would absolutely freak me out. That little sound just drive me. I mean, it's like I was so weird. And nobody wanted to hear what I was talking about, what I had to say. I had this real important stuff, like there really is a God, and God really cares about you, you know. The importance of prayer, or being in communion with God. And I became a fanatic, a madman, a zealot. And that went on for months and months and months. It got worse and worse. And I felt more and more alienated from everybody. And I started making pronouncements to my wife. People would come to visit me, and I'd try and talk to them about God, and I knew they didn't want to hear about it. And they'd leave, and I'd tell my wife, "Don't ever let that person back in here again. They're no good. They don't love God. I don't want to see them." You know? Okay, so I narrow my world down. Eventually my kids get tired of it, so they're out. You know, they're hopeless. And I'm working on my wife one night, and I'm like going at her like crazy. You know, "Why can't you love God? Why can't you love Him?" You know, like that. I mean, a super loving guy, right? You know? And she turns to me, and she looks at me, and she says, "That's it. I can't take it anymore." She says, I'm leaving in the morning. I'm taking the kids." And I said, "You what?" I said, "I'm talking about God's love, and you want to leave?" And she said, "I love you, but you're driving me nuts. Nobody can stand you. Have you noticed nobody ever comes here anymore?" She said, nobody can stand to be around you. I was still sick. I mean, I was still... And, like, that freaked me out. Because here I was. I mean, I'm talking, I'm screaming, yelling, and screaming, and pounding the furniture about God's love, and nobody wants to hear about it. And this one person, she told me that she couldn't take it anymore. So I went into a 2-week, 3-week withdrawal and just became real sullen and morose and thought, maybe I've been doing it wrong. And so then I changed my tactic. And then a year ago, just about a year ago at this time, someone at school, a student whom I had never told my experience to, but I told her that I had died and met God and stuff. I didn't tell her like this story. I just told her that I died in Paris and I met God and I knew God was real and stuff like that. She was a real spiritual student, and I was telling her this stuff over dinner one night. She came to me and she said, by the way, there's a guy here that's real interested in those kind of experiences, and his name's Scott Quimby, and maybe you should talk to him. So a year ago, I went and talked to him, and then he told me about the IONS meeting, and I went to that, and I talked very carefully and fairly briefly at that meeting about my experience. And then the second meeting, IONS meeting, that I spoke at, you were at, that was the second, I think, one. And then I talked to some of Scott's classes. He had a death and dying class, and I talked to them, and I talked to some churches and stuff like that. And now I couldn't talk about my experience very well before, because it gets so I'm emotionally wiped out that I cry so hard that it'd be like, you just have to watch me cry for 5 or 10 minutes. But now what I do when I talk about it is that I stay away from my experience. I'm skating it. I skate through it. I mean, I know I cried a couple times, but I wasn't letting myself get really deep, because if I did, it wouldn't be fun for you. And the crying isn't bad. It's usually, the crying actually feels real good for me, but but other people don't necessarily understand it that way. I mean, they think of tears as sad, and my tears aren't always, but sometimes real happy. And they've given me, just finally I'd like to say, they've given me lots and lots of confirmations of their reality. And I sort of got addicted to their affirmations and confirmations, and then I had to let go of that too, because I was getting real hung up on having visions and having supernatural things happen around me. And those were all real neat stories, but they're absolutely pointless, because they were just done for me to know, and I was getting kind of addicted to that stuff. And what I need to do is to increase my awareness and my sensitivity to see all the miracles that they perform all day long without me asking for big shows of force all the time. And there are plenty of those all the time. So I'm very much into not looking for spectacular supernatural events, because I'm pretty aware of them without anything wonderful happening, and they don't prove anything to anybody anyways. I did things to my wife that should have blown her away. I mean, I made things happen, and I asked for things to happen, signs, and she was so into not wanting to be overwhelmed by this madman that she would fight them, even when they were real concrete manifestations right in front of her. I mean, she knew it was real, but on the other hand, she just figured it was a magic trick that I'd done. So I don't do that stuff anymore. And I've given up on, I used to be real big into visions. I'm real cooled off on them. What I'm looking for, and what I do with my life is try and see the divine being in everybody I meet and work and participate with that being. And it's real fun. I mean, I'm not always successful, but it's real fun to be with someone and they come on angry and you meet them in another place and you end up having a very loving, little time together. Or you meet someone who's upset about something and they have a problem and you don't solve the problem, you go beyond the problem and see where they really are on more of a spiritual soul level and try and be there as a friend with them, as a loving friend with them there. And that seems to be the most effective thing of all. And I study and I flounder and make mistakes. And, I'm really not anybody special. I'm pretty ordinary. And so, when you become aware of God's subtle hand in the daily things of life, it's pretty miraculous. It's pretty wonderful. And the only failure is... So that's... Would you like a break and something to drink? No, I'm fine. Maybe you do.
Was there one thing that happened or that you experienced when you were withdrawn, people were viewing you as a madman, and then somehow you reconnected with everybody? Was there one thing that helped you do that, or?
My wife telling me that she was going to leave me. That was really, really important.
Are you asking what he did then to change that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, right after that, a real interesting thing happened because I was sitting in my chair, and it was in the evening, and I was thinking, what have I done wrong? All I want to do is tell them about love, and nobody wants to hear about what have I done wrong. And a presence came into the room and said to me, I will give you the power to hold their hearts in your hands, and you can do with them whatever you want. And I went, all right, this is what I've been looking for. This is really great. And all of a sudden, and I'm having it now, I got the bad feeling, uh-oh, yeah, you're talking, you're in with the wrong company again. And I got this real bad feeling. And so I sort of dropped back, spiritually. And I've been doing a lot of Bible reading. And I said to this presence, in the name of Jesus Christ, if you are evil, be gone. And if you're good, you're welcome. And there was just this rah! And it's like, oh shit. So I started doing some heavy Jesus praying. And that was the end of that.
And it split.
Yep. And that was a real nice little seduction number. But I haven't had many experiences like that. But I was pretty open during that period. This is right close to that period, and I was real vulnerable. I wanted, to have power over people. Right? I wanted to change people. So I wasn't thinking about loving them. I was thinking about changing them.
And they did right into that.
Yeah, that was like a great opening. I was going to get the power. I could have been another Jimmy Swaggart. Yeah. And, I don't know what it would have come of it, but, yeah. And so that was not a divine angel. That was a person opposed to good who saw an opening and was willing to use it.
I remember that you said that right after that, you quit throwing the Bible at your wife because your wife was more loving to pick up your own socks and preach the Bible.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you have a discussion with the angels about the dark force or this other?
No, because when I was, it's funny because when I was in heaven, I didn't. I really didn't want to think about it. And it was like, that was real tricky because anything you thought about, they responded. I mean, they knew what I was thinking about. And so I tried real hard not to think anything about, after I got through that initial phase of like, I don't belong here, I tried real hard not to think about evil or the pit or anything like that. But I can tell you some thoughts I've had about it since then. And I think that those people are going through what they need to go through. You know, like, how about this for a loving God, that if a person needs to inflict misery and pain on other people, that God, I mean, that's like, God's not real pleased with that. And so how is he going to cure someone of that? Let them act it out. You know? Allow them to do it to the extreme. Let them get a sense of what that's all about. And then sooner or later they're going to have a realization that this is not, you know. Yeah.
Did the question ever arise as to why so few people come back when they've gone over the shall we say, the edge and the depth? Why so few people come back when the majority of them go on?
No, I didn't ask them that. But I, you know, one thing that really flipped me out, I was reading in the Bible about the story about Lazarus, the beggar, and the rich man. And then Jesus said to him, you know, you can go back and tell him, but nobody will believe you. And that really freaked me out because I've asked the angel since, why do you make it so hard for people? Okay, why is it so hard for people to believe in stuff like that? And they said, because of their love is so great that they're willing to give people the choice, and they gave me the choice to go through life literally railing and denying God's existence and denying love's existence. Denying the goodness in everybody else. I mean, you can be as cruel and as evil as you want to be, and they're going to do everything they can to offer you the opportunities to turn towards love and turn towards goodness, but they're not going to physically force you into choosing good. And that's pretty incredible because, like, my son, I have a 17-year-old son, and, like, if he, every time he pisses me off, it's like, you're grounded. That's it. It's like, you're grounded. You blew it again. I treat him sort of like a sophisticated dog. And then you have a dog, you let him out on the leash, they misbehave, and you jerk them back in. And that's how I treat my son. I let him out on the leash, and he screws up, and I pull him in again. Still do. God loves us enough so that he gives us a really long leash and lets us go way, way out there. Constantly, I asked, on a personal sense, why was it so hard for me? I asked about myself. Why was it so hard for me to know the truth? And they said, because I was much more fascinated with things that caused me to believe that I was the center of the world. Like, for example, before my experience, I was fascinated with horror movies. I loved horror movies, and I saw them all. And one of the reasons why I liked horror movies was because it was fun to pretend that you weren't afraid of anything. I mean, it gave me a sense of superiority. I mean, a real false sense, but it was like, I'm not scared. See, it's all phony. I'm not afraid of that. And it's like, so now I can't stand to watch a horror movie. But everything I did, I worshipped myself. And I think that's a really big problem. I think our society works real hard to lead us into that stature because then we're real malleable.
You mentioned about other life forms. Were there others that were humanoid like ours?
Mm-hmm.
And did others seem to have did you get the sense that there were other planets with people having the same learning school type experience that we're going through here, or is the Earth plane kind of a special, almost unique place for that?
No, that they were all schools. Everything in the physical is school. Everything in the physical school, but there's different degrees. Like this school in relationship to other ones is like kindergarten, but that's not so bad because there's preschool. There's no school, and there's, graduate school and stuff like that, but there are worlds where people are doing incredible things with physical, but the physical is like only a form for giving birth to spirit, and it's only a way of spirit learning. Like, for example, just think of it this way: if any of you if you were a spirit and you were all powerful, and your mind could make happen anything that it thought of, how could you learn? Right? I mean, can you imagine the havoc you would create in the universe? Yeah, who, me? So you're put in a relatively harmless, safe playpen. And it seems it's real funny because this world is so uncomplicated, relatively compared to the greater reality, and that we think it's so incredibly complex, but this is real simple compared to the greater reality.
It seems we do have this ability to manifest things, but there's a time factor woven in it. Like we want the new car, okay? We put enough energy in it, we get the new car, but it doesn't bang, pop up instantly here.
Yeah.
You can shape that.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I hear you saying about how difficult the world is. You know, a thing comes into my mind here. Look at how when we first started a year in school and how incredibly difficult it seems. But then when we get to the other end of the year, looking back, it seems a bit easier.
Yeah.
Look at the next grade, the next year like that.
That's a real important point. One of the things that I asked them how I should live, and they said joyfully. Live with joy, and that's real hard. They want us to be very happy. They want us to be full of joy, to live life for fun, playfully, happily, joyfully, reverentially. And that's like so easy to forget.
Where does fear enter in? Is this something that we generate within ourselves? It's not something that quote exists outside. It's something that is self-generated.
Yeah. Because you know what's real interesting. It seems like all fear is based on pain and death. I mean, like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to you? It's going to hurt, or you're going to die, right? Or worse yet, you're going to hurt a lot and then die. And so, what? Yeah. So, those two things aren't what move me anymore. Those aren't my prime motivators. There are other things that move me a lot more than fear of pain and fear of death.
Interesting, Howard, because you look at the whips that government and things have on people. We're going to hurt you, and ultimately, we're going to kill you.
Yeah.
Those are the big whips.
Yeah.
What if those whips don't pain or frighten people anymore?
Yeah.
In your quest for joy in your life, and you said that's hard.
No, it's not hard to get the joy. It's easy to forget about using that as a main focus of my life.
That it become your main focus. You think even though it's not like 100% attainable,
yeah.
You're in a whole lot different position than you used to be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's very unique.
Because the reason why joy is not the end product. But you can't give people really good love if you're not joyful. I mean, what kind of, what's depressing love? I mean, it's like, love, I'm using joyful or happy in the sense of being a loving person. The focus is love, that's the whole beginning and end of the curriculum is loving, but I'm talking about how you do that is joyfully. The idea of a preacher up there preaching the love of God with hell and fire and brimstone is totally missing the point. During my experience, we talked a lot about religion because I was real curious to ask a lot of questions, and I'm like, I participate in a Protestant church, and I think that most religion fails to do the job that it's supposed to do. The job that it's supposed to do is to teach about a loving God and a harmonious and joyful relationship with the universe. And the problem is first of all, most of the priests and ministers aren't really convinced that that's what they're supposed to be doing. And they've got other considerations in mind. So, like, how many ministers dare get up and say, like, look, we have to be for disarmament because it's against God's plan? I mean, that's like a real simple statement. Disarmament. I mean, we have to be against armament. Disarmament is what God wants us to do. How many priests and ministers have the guts to do that? None. I mean, because they know people are going to take a walk if they get up and say that. How many ministers or priests are willing to get up in front of the congregation and say, we have to end poverty, we have to end hunger, and we've got to start doing something about it right now. Like, what can we do right now? And I don't want anybody to pull out $2 and put it in the plate. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a commitment. You know, I mean, they don't, you know, they're so wrapped up in the politics of it. So, and then the other thing is you can manipulate people a lot better based on fear than you can on talking about love all the time. So I asked during my experience, I said, well, what about, what about people that preach or teach about God's love and do it wrong? And they said that they're very, very, very unhappy about that. And that any kind of sin, I mean, no problem about forgiving. But there's one kind of sin that they do have a problem with forgiving, and that's using God's name or the prophets and messiahs and the gifts that God has given us to spiritually awaken us and to abuse those. Like, for example, to use the name of Jesus Christ, for example, to make someone feel bad, to make someone feel guilty, to make someone feel small. How about this? To make someone go off to war and kill, to preach hate, to divide us up because we're a brotherhood. Yeah, I mean, that they're real unhappy about that. They don't like that, and because when you take, I mean, they do take themselves seriously, you know, and it's like, if you're drunk and you're blaspheming like crazy and stuff like that, they'll forgive you, you know. But if you go around and try and make a business, you know, self-promoting business out of God, you know, just for your own personal gain, or to preach hate, you know. I saw Jimmy Swaggart one day on TV. I only watched him 2 times, and both times I only watched him for about 10 minutes, because the first time I watched him, I turned him on, and he was talking about how we should have absolutely nothing to do with the Russians because they're our enemy. We should have no trade with them. We should have no contact with them. We should have no communications with them because they're evil. And it's like, I turned that off. You know, they don't like that. And those people, you know,
it's kind of hard, it seems to me, to teach love, to preach love, to talk love, because in the churches of everybody, I think, is growing up in, you know, it's sort of like we're there for this reason that really isn't connected to that. We're there because it's a social thing to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, we belong to the right. We go to this church, we belong to the right family for that church. And
yeah.
That, I think, is that's the thing I would do.
All today?
Yeah.
Did they say anything concrete about utilization of hunger?
Oh, this is real interesting. Yeah.
That they knew what we could really.
Okay, I can tell you 2 things. First of all, the future that I talked about, this future world of peace and harmony, isn't even going to begin to happen. They're going to unlock the real spiritual gifts. Oh, thanks. They're going to unlock that until we give every human being on this earth an opportunity to be a human being. In other words, I don't know if any of you have ever been hungry, but I tried that once when I was real young. And when you're real hungry, all you think about is food all the time. I mean, it's like you don't get to be a human being anymore. You become an animal. And when you don't have a place to live, you know, the same thing. And,
the homeless thing, right?
Yeah.
I had that experience for a few weeks, and now this appears to be an epidemic that's run loose in our culture here.
Yeah. So I did ask them that. And I told him, I said, you show me all these things, and you lay these all on me. I mean, you lay all these feelings about these things on me, and I can't do anything about it. And they said, you can do something about it. And essentially, the idea is the critical mass idea. And that's the basic idea that one person, by simply not arguing about whether it can or cannot be done, but simply knowing that it must be done and believing that it will be done. What? No, we'll convince another person, and we'll convince another person. And the only way to change things is by convincing everyone that this is what the possibility is. Yeah. Yep.
Was anything mentioned about this drug scene that appears to be getting worse and worse as to what could be done there? Because I imagine it's a form of...
I didn't talk about it.
Did they say, or did you ask about physical manifestations of these lucid
Yeah.
forms? I mean,
they don't like to do it very much because it robs people of choice. And also it freaks people out. Like, for example, if...
No, I mean, are there forms of them? I don't want to say them and us because that comes up.
Oh, they can take any form they like.
I mean, are there... Did they say, or did you ask about, are there physical manifestations of them right now?
Like walking.
No, like walking, living, like in this room or in
Oh, wait a minute. They prefer to not be physical because they're much freer spiritual than they are physical. So to be physical is like a real drag. It would be like me putting you in a plaster suit, in a very thick plaster suit. I mean, how would you like it? It would be like so confining. So...
so they don't like any.
They occasionally do, but it's only real short term.
There's a Ruth Montgomery. Are you familiar with her book?
No, I just know the name. I don't know.
She's spoken of a phenomenon called walk-ins, where people embody.
Yeah.
Feel they've reached the end of their rope and they want to go on, so that they leave their physical form and their entire spirit are trained with the spirit and come in and take over the form and then work out the workings of the karma or things that the person, this body has to work on, and then they go on to be bigger and better.
Yeah.
Has anything like that come up in any given session?
Yeah, it's funny because I talked at Unity. That was one of the first places I told my story at Unity Center, and someone said, you are a walk-in. They didn't say, are you a walk-in? They said, you are a walk-in. And I didn't know what they were talking about. The only thing I could think of was a walk-in refrigerator, like in a restaurant. and I said, I thought it was a joke, and then somebody explained to me what it was, and it was really funny because I'm really not. I am not a walk-in, but a woman. Thank you. Or here. Okay. Stop there.
Well, the cake and the ice cream will last a long time.
But a woman in Seattle, Kimberly Clark, who Connie met and Ed met, knows a man who had a near-death experience and believes, and apparently Ruth Montgomery has written a lot about him, and Kim knows him real well. He believes he is a walk-in, and Kim believes, and Kim I think is real down to earth. Kim believes the guy probably is a walk-in, and one of the ways that this is manifested is the guy had no musical training, and yet he can sit at piano and play any classic, and beautifully. And I asked her, I said, well, have you had a real musician, check this out, or is this just your, it sounds good. She said, no, real musicians said this guy is like unbelievable. And the guy's never had the guy is a janitor in a church, and he can sit down at the piano, and he's never played a piano before in his life. He can play like Rachmaninoff, Bach, Beethoven, anything. And the guy doesn't know why he can.
Why is everybody near-death experience different?
Oh, I asked him about that.
Why is everybody's near-death experience different?
Here's a
Or do you manifest your own near-death?
No, they do it for you. This is the really beautiful part about it. When a person makes the transition from, this world into the greater reality, which is the way I like to think about it, they give that person what they need. So, for example, to take you through that transition without freaking you out. So, like, for example, if you're a good person and your background is like super fundamentalist, right? They're going to give you something that you can comprehend. I mean, they might even dress up a little heavenly choir, you know. I mean, they'll build a little church on the hill and everything. I mean, because it's easy for them because they just do it and it's done, you know. I mean, and they'll literally, that person can have that whole trip. For a Buddhist or a Tibetan, you know, from their background, they're going to guide them into the next world through what their cultural expectations is, because they don't want to scare us. They love us. And they know it's real hard to go from this world to the next. And so whatever people need, including negative experiences, if that's what they need.
That's because you didn't believe in God, right?
No, they gave me exactly what I believed in and what I needed.
No, but the first part.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's what I believed in and what I needed. They gave that to me. That was real, and they gave it to me because that's where I was at, and they loved me. Can you imagine loving someone so much that you would let them put their hand on the burner on the stove and say, you want to find out how hot it is? Here. This is how hot really is. You want to find out about, slime? Here. You can dive in the slime for a while if you really want to know about it. And that's what they did.
I have to ask that question that I don't want to ask, but somebody will want to know. I saw or heard the correlation, potential correlation, of part of your perceptions when it was not pretty, you were being tormented.
Yep.
I saw the potential of that being a dual perception, perhaps, of your physical tormentors on the table. Did you were able to check that out when they were shaving you and experiences in that community, clawing your flesh?
I've thought about that, but the time sequence is the whole experience was over, and I woke up and they just came into the room to prep me. I mean, I remember very, very clearly, and the experience was over, them taking me out of the bed and putting me on a special gurney to prepare me, and then taking me off that gurney and putting me on a transporting gurney. Right? I mean, that was all like real clear and real, and those were not mixed.
Did your wife know you were dead?
No. And I've asked her about it, and she said, to be perfectly honest, her response was, she said, I think I would have known if you were dead, and I never felt like you were dead. And my response to her was, I said, you were so freaked out, you wouldn't have known if a truck had run over you. And she said, well, that's true, too. So I said, do you know for sure, on an intuitive level, whether I was really there or not? And she said, no. But she said she can't believe that she wouldn't have somehow known if I was gone, too. And I said,
I love you goodbye. She didn't have to leave the hospital then or something. Where was she all night?
It crossed out several times.
yeah, coming and going, in and out.
But the time you said I love you goodbye,
She was right there next to me.
that was not in terms of time. The time was not very much.
Right.
What was
Probably.
I thought it was a lot of hours. All night. Wasn't it all night and overnight?
No, my experience took about 3 years. My experience took about 3 years. In clock time, probably a second.
Oh, so they didn't operate you on in Sunday morning, then they operated Saturday night.
Yeah.
Oh, when you were at 9:30, I thought you meant 9:30 Sunday
Yeah, that's what I
morning.
thought too, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Well, this is all part of the story, is that they said they weren't going to operate on me, and I had the experience, and then they operated on me.
They didn't know.
Oh, okay.
No.
I thought you were talking about an autopsy or something when you were saying something about the table.
No, did they say, it's okay to let someone be as cruel as they like. What did they say about the victims?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about what they said about the Holocaust. Okay? I said that, how could you let that happen? And they said that, first of all, that the evil that's done in this world is not from God. It's opposed to God. And that God and his angels continuously tries to direct man in a loving and subtle and gentle way, away from evil. And then And man constantly is fighting those good impulses, those good desires, and men move towards evil. And that when they allowed World War I to happen, which is one of the few wars that the potential for wars is great, and they only let a few happen. The idea was that would be an end of it. People would learn war is futile, war is pointless, because that war had no point whatsoever. It had no reason to begin, and it had no good conclusion, and all you had as a consequence was millions of horrible deaths, and it should have been the end of war. So then, with the gifts that we were given in this century, like radio and loudspeakers and airplanes and radar and all those things, what do we do with it? We allow the situation in the world to develop. We have these tremendous inequities. Okay? And we allowed and encouraged Hitler. And by we, I'm talking about the world allowed and encouraged Hitler. Nobody stopped Hitler. Hitler said, he said in his book, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. And nobody said, stop Hitler. Yeah, there was like, hey, well, he's going to get Germany back in shape. Hey, let him do his thing. We don't care.
But there was a Greek factor in there, too, because there were those that fought for like mad in all wars.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, pushing things on so they'll make their own money buck. Right?
Yep.
South America now.
Yep.
Did they say...
So wait, let me finish with... So, that ran its course. Hitler became powerful. He started to do what he said he was going to do. It was an abomination, right? And that World War II, which, Hitler had to be stopped, but he could have been stopped way sooner without the war, which we didn't do. Nobody did. It could have been stopped by not allowing the horrible conditions in Germany to happen. That's why Hitler came to power, was because of the situation that happened in Germany. Yep. It was evil, vindictive, vengefulness that made it happen. And that the consequences were to allow people to suffer the consequences of what happened. And I said, yeah, but what about the Jews? But you got to keep in mind that 20 million Russians died, and you can't ever forget that. But I said, what about the Jews? And he said, and God allowed His most special people, the most special people, the people that they've always favored and loved, allowed them to be sacrificed. And when they said that, the pain of what they were saying to me about the pain of not the death, because to them death isn't like, people dying isn't a problem. The pain that the people suffered is what we're talking about, was a tremendous sacrifice that they made. And they inflicted that pain upon themselves. And that the Jewish people that were killed during World War II weren't they were killed because they were good. It was evil killed good, and for the whole world to see. Right? They were non-combatants, they were the innocent, they were the lamb taken to the slaughter, and for the whole world to put an end to that now. And do you know how frustrating it is to them to see that we begin to entertain doing those kinds of things again? Like, that's it. It's all over. Stop it. You've seen what it comes to. You've seen how evil can be. Okay? You understand. You learn the lesson. That's it. No more. Right? And now people begin to entertain them again.
Howard, the fundamental question on loving God, where does evil come from? What? This seems to go against the flow. And I've recognized it for years myself.
I think the way that they explain it to me is real convoluted, but a way that an analogy that I've come to is like, in the world of trees, for example, and I'm real fond of trees. I'm real into trees. every tree is uniquely different and uniquely interesting because it goes through a struggle. Theoretically, the genetic information inside the seeds of those trees would produce identical trees, right? And if you put them in a nursery, or in a orchard, you can produce almost identical looking kinds of trees, which are incredibly boring and uninteresting, and have no great individual gifts of their own. I mean, that they're good for mass planning, they're good for predictability. You even have to work at keeping them from becoming individuals. But trees in nature, every tree in the world is clearly and distinctly different and unique because it's gone through a struggle. And that keep in mind that the worst that evil can do in this world, the very worst thing that it can do, is to keep a person from God. But God's not ever going to allow that to happen because everybody's going to end up at God sooner or later, by hook or by crook. I mean, God's got a lot of time. And that if a person fails in a lifetime, they might have another life experience, or they might live in another world, or they might live in another dimension, or they might spend 50 billion years in heaven learning from the angels themselves. I mean, there are endless numbers of levels of learning.